It is hour number 2. That's drive time right here on the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk. Lawton Swan hanging out with you. And if you join us on Monday afternoons at 5 o'clock, you know what that means. Our good buddy William Qualkinbush joins the program from 105.5 The Roar in the upstate state, out of bounds with Qualk and Ben, noon to 3 o'clock each and every day. Qual, what's up, man?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a very different Monday. It's a better Monday, a kinder, gentler Monday, Swanee. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, a kinder, gentler Monday off of the heels of a little Old Testament Dabo Sweeney this week after Tyler gave him a phone call. And now here we sit, Qual, with the Clemson picking up their best win of the season. I thought defensively they looked like the squad we thought they would be all year. I did call Sam Hartman Riley Skinner earlier in the program, so I'll go ahead and correct that again. Was that more about Clemson's defense, or was that about Sam Hartman kind of being in a little bit of a funk?
Well, I think it's some of both. I mean, look, Sam Hartman's not had a ton of success. You know what? I shouldn't say that. His teams haven't had a ton of success against Clemson in his career. He had plenty of success last year, and it was the defense that couldn't get a stop. And DJ Uyunglele kind of stood on his head there as the reason Clemson won, and the Tigers able to win in overtime. So that's that may be neither here nor there. But this is a guy who lost to Clemson 4 times,
right?
And he's had a stellar career, but that stellar career has not extended in every measure to his battles with Clemson. It just hasn't worked out that way. I also thought that Clemson, but there are things that coaches do, Swanee, and I would say sometimes there are things that fans would like coaches to do that might be right. And I would put media in the fans category, non-coaches. Basically, non-coaches are saying this is what coaches should do. And the more time I spend around coaches, the more time I spend like talking to them and trying to figure out how they think. Not necessarily trying to prove them right or wrong, but just figuring out how they think. Here's what I'll say generally about coaches.
Okay.
Number one, there are generally good reasons why coaches do or don't do things. And number two, those reasons might be kind of weird and sometimes not. Basically, they're picking and choosing bits of information that are important to them to use in making those determinations. I feel like Clemson should have been playing 3D tackles all year, Swanee. I looked Nick Eason dead in the face in July, and I said, all tackles 24. Let's go. Let's ride. Like, you don't need an end. And, at that point, we didn't know T.J. Parker was going to be a boss, and Xavier Thomas was a man possessed.
Yeah.
But 3D tackles, if you don't think that had some sort of if that didn't present some sort of a limiting factor, if you didn't think that was some sort of a limiting factor on Audric Estime's ability to go off, I think you're crazy. I think that helped. I think simplifying the blocking scheme when we've seen the definition of insanity on the offensive line and different people, but they're doing the same stuff and it ain't working. It's not like they're not good concepts that you're running, but it's not working. So let's do something else. Let's continue to try something else until we find a thing that works. And sometimes coaches limit themselves that way. I'm of the opinion that you need Will Shipley and Phil Maffa in your backfield. Now, you didn't on Saturday, but that also required an uncommon effort from Phil Maffa. I know I'm straying way off from your question, but it's going to come back to Sam Hartman, I promise.
Okay.
So, I'm getting there. I realize I've wandered way off the reservation. I'll get back. So you understand that you need both running backs, but a lot of times, you're starting Shipley because you see lots of things that may not be the most important thing, but that matter to you. I think in the case of Sam Hartman and Clemson, I guess you can file it away as there are things that Sam Hartman does very well that make him incredibly gifted, incredibly talented, incredibly valuable. Those things don't do well against Clemson. And there is not a coaching staff anywhere that has helped him. He stands there, he takes a beating. He took a beating last year, Swanee. He just threw the ball up and his receivers made plays. So I say all that to say, like, Sam Hartman as a player probably is more valuable in the world than he is against Clemson, and he's never figured out how to do it, probably because coaches don't want to try certain things when they don't try to move him out of the pocket or whatever the case is. It's just, I mean, we're going to come back to this theme, but it's just coaches being coaches. I think it helped Clemson. I think it hurt Notre Dame here, and it certainly has hurt Sam Hartman in his career.
Again, he's on Twitter at Qualk Talk. You brought up Phil Maffa, and I had been, I'm not the only one. I don't, present myself as some college football guru, but I've been calling for this guy to get more carries all year, especially over the past 3 weeks or so. Really been looking at it. And to see him go out and get 36 of them, obviously with Will Shipley out for 186 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think my question now becomes, how do you keep Maffa from being the starter? And I know you can't maybe lose your job because you're injured, but that performance by Maffa was maybe the best performance by a running back we've really seen at Clemson since maybe Travis Etienne.
Well, listen, I think I would reframe that a little bit. Let me start with this. I agree with you that Maffa should be getting more carries. Now, I think we've done this weird thing, and it's been a frustration of mine for over a year, where we've done this weird thing where if you dare suggest that my guy, whoever it is, Maffa or Shipley, deserves 1 carry less than he possibly could get, or if you dare to say that the other guy deserves 1 more carry than I possibly think that he should, then you are a nincompoop and you're an idiot and you don't know what you're looking at. And actually, Shipley sucks because I love Maffa, but actually Maffa sucks because I love Shipley. And they turn from pro guys, like pro camps to anti-camps. And you start ripping guys. I mean, I heard people say, well, Shipley should just go ahead and get in the portal. And look, I'll be honest, snap for snap, Phil Maffa looks better than Will Shipley right now. He just does.
Yeah.
I would reframe it a little bit, Swanee, and say, I don't think Will Shipley's losing a job because he's hurt. I think Will Shipley's had 8 games where he's been pretty healthy enough. It ain't like he was lighting the world on fire before he got hurt against NC State.
Right.
So I would say Phil Maffa did the thing that Will Shipley could have done theoretically all year long. Now, I'm also going to say this. Will Shipley didn't get a chance to, run a lot of zone, run the same scheme, right? Run a lot of zone run scheme. He didn't get a chance to do all that. With regards to his time as a starter. So Phil Maffa may have benefited from a blocking scheme that was significantly different and significantly more effective in that one particular game. And maybe that Shipley goes off if he's playing behind that offensive line, playing that way against that opponent.
Yeah.
Let's see if he misses other games, and let's see if Phil Maffa can continue to do that, because I do think that we saw a high watermark for Phil Maffa. Like, I don't think they want Phil Maffa to carry the ball 36 times and push 200 yards. I think they'd rather throw it a little better and use some other guys. But I do think that Phil Maffa, I'm not sure who should be the starter. Right now, if it were me, I'd probably say Maffa deserves to be the starter. But I don't think that means that Shipley should never carry the ball ever again. And if you give it to him, then you're playing a lesser back. I think ideally they would have both those guys.
So that's going to lead to the next question, though, that a lot of people are going to have for you, Qualk, and you may have got it today on your show. Again, on 105.5 The Roar in the Upstate from noon until 3 o'clock. It's Alabama's with Qualk and Ben. Why did it take into the 9th game of the season before Clemson figured out that they would be better offensively with the zone blocking scheme?
Well, it's a great question. And I think it boils down to this. You saw an offense last year that lacked. And so what you brought in a guy with a track record of developing really good offenses. And so as much as that, look, here's what your question should do, Swanee.
Okay.
It should disabuse people of the notion that this is the Clemson offense and it's not Garrett Riley's offense. Because guess what? What they were doing the first 8 games was Garrett Riley's offense. You go back and watch them at TCU, and I can't tell you how much they ran like DT counter and DH counter and all the stuff that they're doing. I don't know how many times they ran butt sweep and all the different run plays that you can run. I don't know how many times they did that at TCU, but I know GT counter is what that offense was known for. I know that's what Lincoln Riley's offenses have been really good. His best run games have featured that. And so he brought that to Clemson. If this were still the Dabo Swinney Clemson offense or whatever, if this was still Dabo just meddling all the time and, I wish he'd let Garrett run the plays, then they would have been running this. Because this is what Clemson's known for a long time. This is the zone blocking scheme that won them 2 national championships. The reality is this is the scheme that most of these offensive linemen, in fact, I would suggest to you that all of these offensive linemen, what they just did is what they were recruited to. And so you're in between this reality where, this offensive line, they were recruited to a thing. They've been trained in a thing, especially guys that have been here. On the other hand, that wasn't good enough. That offensive scheme wasn't good enough. That schematic carve out was not enough to get you back where you want to go. So you want to develop into a team that can use GT counter, that can run the run schemes that Garrett Riley used to get to a national championship game last year and is used with great success other places, SMU, et cetera. So it's like this balance between what can help me win today versus is that the only goal? Because the goal should be to win the day, but the goal should also be to become a better, more cohesive offense that can also win tomorrow and that can elevate itself tomorrow. So I think that's the push and pull here. I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
I think because of the injuries and because you've already got 4 losses and there's a bit of a desperation here, I think they went back to what can help them win today. I think eventually if Garrett Riley's going to work out here, you're going to get better at what we saw the first 2 months. They're just not there right now. Now, I'd also point this out, and I'll credit my colleague Ben Milstead for this. He brought this up at the end of our show today. I thought it was a great point. He said, could it be that in installing this new blocking scheme that everybody's raving about, that really Notre Dame freaked out? And then Notre Dame was not prepared to counter that, and so it helped Clemson. And if that's the case, then you're going to have to do some other stuff because guess what? Georgia Tech, North Carolina, South Carolina, the element of surprise will not be there in those 3 opponents because they now have 60 minutes of offense of Clemson running those same zone schemes from last year, and they can even go back to last year and say,
right,
this looks like what they're running now. So I think there's still a lot to be determined on that. I agree with your question, but it comes down to what you're developing for the future. And look, maybe this team's best way to win is to run the zone, run the inside zone, run split zone, run all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I think there's still the church is still out on that, if you will.
13 of 26 for Cade Klubnik, just 109 yards. That's probably been glossed over in the excitement of a victory over a number 12 ranked team in the AP and the 15th ranked team in the college football playoff poll, and quite frankly, just being Notre Dame, a big brand. The passing game's still not great. What I do like, though, okay, if I had to say something I like, even though Klubnik does put the ball in peril quite a bit, I do like sort of the slants and the inside routes that Clemson's running. But simply because for so many years, I guess about two years with DJ, you just didn't see hardly any of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this passing game, similar to the run game, the build is slow. And it's not linear. I mean, progression is not linear. I think in anything we do in life, progression is not linear. That's certainly true of quarterbacks. It's true of coaches. It's true of programs. You don't go in a straight line up without falling. You don't fall without picking your head up above water for a moment. That's not the way life works. It'd be great if it did, because then you'd be able to accurately predict the next step, particularly when you're dealing with young people like this.
Right.
You can see sort of the elements of the passing game come together at times. I mean, like you say, they did a really good job with slants. I think some of what happened in the pass game is twofold. Number one, they were able to run the ball effectively, and they were able to out-muscle and win the line of scrimmage against Notre Dame. So Clemson got ahead very early in the game and then was up, 10, 2 scored, and then they're up 3 scores.
Yep.
And so you don't want to throw the ball. I mean, you don't want to put Cade Klubnik in that situation. You're still a little bit concerned with the offensive line, and they're doing a good job blocking today for the run, so you want to kind of keep it simple. And then your punter, Aiden Swanson's having a great day.
Man.
He got the ball at midfield.
Yeah.
Listen, you don't want to screw things up. You don't want to, you don't want to, create the turnover trying to be too aggressive when you don't try. Tyler Brown didn't practice at all last week. Cole Turner's not there. Antonio Williams isn't there. Your best tight end on Saturday was Sage Ennis blocking, cracking back against the grain of your in your run scheme. So, I understand why people are frustrated with that, and I understand why the coaches did it that way. They are going to need more from that passing game in the future if they're going to want to do anything against these next 3 opponents in the way of yards and points, I think.
Look, man, I don't have the stats in front of me of the greatest punting performance by a Clemson Tiger. I know this a year ago when South Carolina was playing Clemson, the Kroger kid or whatever his name is for the Gamecocks was unbelievable. I'd have to put that performance I saw from Aiden Swanson in that category, with a little sidebar performance for Cade Klubnik with his little PPO, the little punt pass option that Dabo Swinney put in. I mean, from a field position standpoint, that was about as good as it gets.
It was brilliant. 7 punts, 6 inside the 20, 1 muff. Brilliant. It was absolutely what you need to do. And look, I've argued with people for years that Clemson didn't have to be great on special teams. Not in the punt game, not in the field position game, they didn't have to. Because when Trevor Lawrence is taking the ball 1st and 10 at his own 25 every time, he's going 75 and scoring. You ain't got to worry about it. You know, you give the other team the ball at the minus 45, well, they might get a field goal, but you ain't got to worry about it. Now, because of the talent gap and the schematic gap that has shrunk and disappeared, may even be on the other side sometimes, you better be good on special teams. That's why Shane Beamer won games last year, because he was better on special teams. He stole possessions and he stole momentum of games with special teams. Why is South Carolina 3-6? Because they're not good at stealing possessions in special teams this year. That was his ace in the hole. That's what he did. That's Beamer ball, right? Dabo needs his own form of Beamer ball. And the little punt pass option, the PPO, as Dabo said after the game, that's a great way to do it. Putting the game in the hands of your punter when things are going well. And you know what? Sometimes, we've talked about Clemson. Every punter that faces Clemson is Ray Guy. Notre Dame's punter was fantastic, but you know what they did? They protected better, and he had a punt returner who wasn't just going to fair catch. He was going to catch the ball and get a few yards. Hamp Green, as much as people want to, whine and moan about who's playing and who gets the reps or whatever, Hamp Green averaged 9 yards a punt return. He took about a 50.5-yard average and turned it into about a 41-yard net, which is not very good, Swanee. 41 yards as a punter is not very good. But a couple times Notre Dame, I think, outkicked the coverage. But I felt like Clemson just gave Hamp Green an opportunity to get like a first down's worth of yards and to keep you winning that field position battle. That was huge, I thought, in the game. Huge. Not just punting, but the punt return game that Clemson was able to have success in.
Again, on Twitter at Qualt Talk, just about 2 more minutes with him here, and we'll get him on his way. All right, Qualt, so how did your perception or perspective on the Georgia Tech, the North Carolina, and the South Carolina games change after what you saw on Saturday?
Well, I mean, I felt like this was going to be a 5-loss team after the Miami game. Because they were going to lose to Notre Dame and they were going to lose to North Carolina, because those are the caliber of teams that Clemson had lost to. Then they lost to NC State, which is the caliber of everybody else. And I thought, well, you could go 4-8.
Yeah.
Now I think the perspective changes because you've seen what the Death Valley crowd can do. You've seen that the fans were not deflated. I mean, truly, the offense in the second half wasn't great, but the fans didn't sit on their hands and whine and moan because the defense was giving them something to cheer about. It was a crowd that even at noon, in kind of an annoyed manner, 4-4, it was ready to get behind this team. If they're ready to get behind this team Saturday, then they're going to be ready to get behind this team this coming week. They're going to be ready to get behind this team on Senior Day against North Carolina. They're going to travel well to Columbia. Like, I think now I've gone from thinking that it's very possible that Clemson goes 6-6 or 7-5, but they're not going to win them all, to I think Clemson has a very good chance to go 8-4. Because Notre Dame's the best defense remaining. And if they can continue to run the ball like they have, they're going to run it on North Carolina. They're going to run it on Georgia Tech, and they're going to run it on South Carolina. So I think that's the way my perspective has changed, Swanee, is that now, whereas every time I reframe Clemson's season, really the entire month of October, I reframed it in a more negative light. This is the first time since probably the Florida State game that I've reframed the season in a more positive light. And I think that's good news for Clemson moving forward if they can continue to keep it up.
There you go. That's William Qualkinbush hanging out with us here on the show that shakes the Southland.